Hey there, succulent friends! Real quick before we jump in, Mountain Crest Gardens has hit the road recently and we're bringing you a whole new series of videos. Now don't worry, we're still going to film our regular plant care videos here at the nursery, but you're also going to get to see some great conversations with succulent experts, a bunch of cool DIY planting projects. We're going to tour nurseries down in the San Diego area, and we're also going to walk around a lot of really incredible private gardens. Now, I can't imagine a better way to kick this all off than with the Queen of Succulents herself, Debra Lee Baldwin. Enjoy! Hi there, Annie Schreck from Mountain Crest Gardens here, and today, as part of our series with succulent experts, I'm sitting with the lovely Debra Lee Baldwin. She's a succulent expert and a writer, kind of a photojournalist. You take amazing photos, and for those of you who don't know, she, I think, really started the renaissance of succulents. So your book, Designing with Succulents, really brought them to the forefront.
Thank you.
That's why a lot of us have even heard of succulents, is because of you and your work with them.
Oh, thank you, Annie.
So I'm really excited to get to talk to you today and hear about sort of your career and how the succulent scene has changed over the course of that career.
Wow.
To start though,
to start.
Slow start.
Okay.
I always like to ask this question when I get to talk with plant people is, when did you first know you were a plant person? How did that begin for you?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, one of my very first words was mesembryanthemum.
No.
Yes, it was.
I don't believe it.
It totally was.
What?
No, I even remember the moment. It's one of my earliest memories. It was this time of the year, the spring, and I was in the passenger seat of the car with my mom. And I even remember where we were in the car, and there was this bank of the most searingly pink plant that just covered this whole expanse. And I'm like, what is that? What is that? And my mom, who I wouldn't have thought of as a plant person especially, said mesembryanthemum.
Wow.
And that was actually a word I learned right around the same time as nasturtium.
Okay.
And to this day, I have a real fondness for mesembryanthemums and nasturtiums. Wow. And in fact, I grow them in my garden.
Yeah.
Yeah, both of them.
Oh, I love that.
But I'm a word person.
Yeah.
So to me, that really fits me. I mean, I love words. I love the etymology of words. I loved your video on, the Latin terms and how to, what they mean and why they're important. That's all part of who I am. I think I'm probably first and foremost a word person, and maybe secondly a plant person.
I love it. And it's really, you can see that in both your writing and your videos that you're a great communicator, and I think that's what draws people to you.
Communicator.
You don't just know a lot about succulents, you know how to talk about them.
I like to talk. And I love to use words and to communicate using words well. Mm-hmm. So now, no pressure. I got to continue doing that.
You're sometimes even referred to as the Queen of Succulents. So why succulents? What do you love about them in particular?
Oh gosh, there's so much to love about them. I never tire of them. You think, well, it's such a narrow niche in horticulture. Why don't you move on to something else? Why not tillandsias next? And I'm like, I haven't even scratched the surface with succulents. There's just so much. In my own garden, there's, so many areas where I've put succulents in the ground and they've thrived and they've been the easiest plants to maintain and grow. I have a real problem now growing perennials, woody perennials, because they tend to dry out and then they're dead, and the succulents next to them are still going strong. Mm-hmm. I think that's a big part of it. As a garden photojournalist and garden writer for publications for much of my career, I was very acutely aware of trends and what was foremost and important to convey to the public that was like the drought, what to do about the drought, the situation we're in California especially. And working with Sunset Magazine, we emphasized a lot of plants that were more suitable for this area, for this climate. And so the whole idea of what will grow well in the ground here and does not need a lot of water, that can basically get by on rainfall alone, it's always going to be an important topic. Now, if you can take those same plants, and the whole idea of drought is not sexy. but the idea of creating a beautiful, drought-tolerant, low-water landscape. Now you're talking aesthetics, you're talking beauty.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the first book I ever really sat down and looked at about succulents was Yvonne Cave's. Now she's an Australian author, and she wrote a book, Succulents for the Contemporary Garden.
Okay.
And I assume it's still in print. And that was the first book I ever saw, page after page after page of photographs of succulents. And again, it was a telling moment. It was just a, oh my gosh, look at the symmetry, look at the geometry, look at the phenomenal repetitions.
Yeah.
You know, and as a design writer, I'm aware of contrast and repetition and scale and proportion and how to effectively use sight lines and focal points, because that's what I wrote about. I toured the finest gardens in San Diego.
Yeah.
As a scout for Sunset Magazine and as a garden writer for Better Homes and Gardens and other big publications, including the local San Diego Union Tribune and San Diego Home Garden. So I was aware of all that in the bigger landscape, and then seeing it repeated or emphasized or brought forth in plants alone, so that if you have one plant in a pot, you've got an artwork.
Right, okay.
And then if you take that plant and that pot, and they have repetitions and contrasts, and then a top dressing that maybe is like the mat for the painting. You know, it doesn't yell at you, but it makes it.
Complements the whole design.
Yeah,
okay.
It pulls it all together.
Yeah.
And there's tremendous potential. They really are for, I mean, if you're going to grow succulents in the ground, it's going to be southern and coastal California from the Bay Area south. And then if you go much farther east, you're running up against the desert. So there is that climate range that in-ground succulents will thrive in. Now
the
that's
soft succulents.
the soft succulents. And then closer to the desert, you get into the cactus and agaves. And farther north, the smaller the succulents get as they get more tolerant of the cold, like the sempervivums. But basically, the landscaping is here in Southern California.
Yeah.
So that first presentation in Portland, where I'm basically scrambling to figure out what to say to these people, was all about growing them in containers.
Okay.
Because containers are portable.
Yeah.
And can be moved and sheltered when the weather gets too cold, too wet, or too hot. So you're in charge. And most people that are into gardening have, you know, a sunny windowsill, a covered patio, a balcony, a rooftop, someplace where at least the plants can be outdoors for 6 to 8 months out of the year.
Back in the time of the first edition, what was the succulent scene like in this area, San Diego? Like, where were people finding these plants?
You know, we have always been the perfect climate. And there have always been succulent aficionados and succulent specialty nurseries. Jeff Moore of Solana Succulents had his nursery long before succulents really took off. In fact, even in Northern California, Robin Stockwell had succulent gardens long before it became the thing. And also the Cactus and Succulent Society of America has been very active for decades with the collectors that are into, you know, one plant per pot, seeing them in habitat. The total focus is on the plant itself and with a special interest in rarities.
Okay.
I'm very flattered that at one of the biennial conventions of the Cactus and Succulent Society of America, Attila Capitani, an Australian expert in succulents, credited me with launching global interest in succulent plants. And he actually said that to all these collectors in the audience who are probably like, huh?
I'm so glad. And he's coming from, you know, the southern hemisphere, far away, so I think he's got something to say about global.
and he, you know, he visited here at a different time, and you know, it is, we have these pockets throughout the world of places where these plants really do well. They really thrive. And New Zealand and parts of Australia is one of those areas. So Southern California, so we have a lot in common with them. And so that's not surprising. If you look at all the, the people who are on social media, there are a lot of Aussie collectors and enthusiasts and experts and nurseries. So we have that little bit of an overlap with that.
So a lot has changed where we went from, succulents being kind of a niche interest with, Cactus and Succulent Society and just a few people, odds and ends. And now every year we see new and more people getting into succulents. Why do they lend themselves to beginners and people who are new to plants like that?
Well, I think it's the fact that they are very easy to take care of. If you forget to water them, they make it anyway. In fact, watering is always a big topic of interest because people have heard, oh, don't overwater your succulents. That's the worst thing you can do. Well, there's huge discussion about that. We can talk about that some other time.
That's a whole video.
Well, and I also have a whole page on my website,
nice.
DebraLeeBaldwin.com, on that very topic. So I think the low maintenance aspect of it is certainly a big part of it. The fact that they have personality, so it's the next best thing to a goldfish or a kitten. You can have a plant that is a living sculpture, that's maybe fuzzy, that is petable, that you nurture. It maybe looks like a rose, but it never fades, and yet it produces its own flowers. I mean, there's so many things that you can love about them, in addition to the practicality of it, the aesthetics. But I credit brides. I think brides are what really launched succulents into the stratosphere, because brides want something that nobody else has ever done before. Brides, when they noticed that and this started with florists who started incorporating succulents into bouquets. When brides noticed that succulents, echeverias in particular, look like blue roses, and therefore matched their eyes.
Oh, okay.
No rose has ever matched a bride's eyes before, and would work with their color scheme and would be different. And then the sentimental aspect of it, oh my gosh, when we come back from the honeymoon, I can pull the succulents out of my bouquet and plant them.
Yeah.
And then I'll have this memory of my wedding in my garden forever. And when the bush gets big enough, why, maybe my own daughter will have one of my succulents descendants in her bouquet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, so brides, from little plants in front of everybody at the reception that they could take home, to their hair ornaments and their bouquets, pushed succulents out there big time. And everybody was seeing them, and everybody wanted them, and suddenly they were cool, and suddenly everybody was doing them, which kind of defeated the purpose.
I suppose everything can be a trend. Yeah. Okay, so and I think a lot of people are familiar with succulents in that capacity of maybe they have one on their windowsill or their office at work or at home on a desk. What about outside? Because that's what I see is, you really bring to the table this eye for design and large-scale landscaping with succulents. What role are they serving in the garden there? What do you use them for in design?
Well, I think the most important thing that succulents do, at least in a larger garden, is they give you that opportunity to have a bold, upright form.
Okay.
That is like a sculpture, but it's a living sculpture, and it's fountain shaped. So I'm looking past you to that area of my garden, and I'm thinking about when I first started this garden, and it was just, when I take a picture of it, it looked like a salad, because I was interested in every kind of plant I could grow, but I wasn't interested in creating contrast and definition and shape and form and texture and the juxtaposition of those things, which are so important to any kind of design, not just garden design, what you do in your living room, what you wear. It all has to do with contrast, repetition, scale and proportion, texture, colors, and all of those things. Like with your coloring, you have that lovely auburn hair. You're very well aware of how that works with the colors you choose to wear, even with the frames of your glasses. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but you grow up with that coloring. You learn what works and what doesn't. There are certain colors that work for you.
funny.
And it probably has to do with contrast and repetition. And that, so to get back to the garden, when I started adding large agaves, of course I added them when they were small, but they got large.
Yeah.
Suddenly, there was a focal point. Suddenly, there was a statement piece. Suddenly, there was something in the viewer's eye that was compelling and interesting and dynamic that would draw you to that space.
And were the agaves some of the first things you planted then, these large pieces?
Yeah, and you know, I think a lot of people kind of went the same direction I did. Agave americana, the century plant.
Uh-huh.
Well, that is indigenous to the Southwest and northern Mexico. And it's an agave we're all familiar with. Now keep in mind, there are dozens of species and hundreds of cultivars of agave. Americana is not the only one for your garden. But I saw a pup that somebody had put out with their trash just down the street.
Uh-huh.
And it was just the right size for a gap in my garden. It was cute. It was like 2 feet tall. And
So small, so
I
cute.
know, so small. So I planted that in my garden, and you know, it got bigger and bigger, and it looked better and better. And I thought, well, that was smart of me. You know? And then a professional landscaper friend came by, and he said, Debra, you really ought to think about moving that because it's going to be in the path. Oh. And I said, well, when that happens, I'll move the path. Because it was my agave. I wasn't going to, you know, try to risk its life by moving it.
Yeah.
And then it eventually, I eventually did move the path. It eventually got to be 8 or 9 feet tall and as wide. It was the plant that I'm talking about it in the past tense. It was the plant that everybody posed in front of when they visited the garden. You can just imagine, you know, these leaves behind you. And then it bloomed. And I chronicled that on my website and also on YouTube, Big Blue.
Okay.
The rise and fall of Big Blue. And Big Blue cost me several $100s because it sent up a bloom stalk that was, 18 feet tall.
Holy cow.
It was a tree, and when Big Blue died, because they do when they bloom, it was an undertaking. I mean, that trunk fell on a Palo Verde and just about killed it.
Wow.
Because the guys who were removing it weren't, well, they were fine, but you know, the thing swung around and landed on the tree.
Yeah. You know? Down the line, we're actually going to get to walk around Debra's gorgeous garden together, and we're going to do some cool planting projects as well. Just generally have a good succulent time. So be sure to subscribe and click the bell so you can follow our travels. And you can find a ton more fabulous material from Miss Debra herself over on her YouTube channel, on her website, and in her books, all of which are linked below. So I'll see you on our next field trip, and until then, happy succulenting.